Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to take a closer look at installing an extended range cassette on my Smuggler. This bike is running an 11-speed Shimano drivetrain right now, and I'm looking after that 500%-ish gear range that something like Eagle can provide. This is also part 2 of the quick check on the 946 tooth E13 cassette. Since I'm going to talk about installation of it, if you need more data, just use the link on the screen to check that video. Even though I have to replace the freehub body on my bike to install this 946 cassette, I consider this to be a better solution to extend the gear range on my 11-speed. And here's why. Number one is weight. The modified cassettes usually add bigger cogs here behind the 42 or 40, and those add weight, unsprung weight to the rear axle, and that was not something I was interested in. As you're adding bigger cogs here, if you get bigger than 46 teeth, then you have to think about changing the cage on your rear mech. The existing 11-speed Shimano and SRAM, Shimano is GS and GS, and SRAM will go well up until 46 teeth. After that, you have to modify the cage, and again, that was not something that I was interested in. As you extend the range of your cassette, many people start to think about changing the chainring size as well. And in my case, I have to keep in mind the fact that on this frame, the maximum I can install is 34. What you see in my case is a 32 oval that goes from 30 to 34. So I cannot usually go bigger than this, but I can definitely go smaller. Talking about bigger and smaller, it's kind of hard to talk about any of that without looking at gear range calculator. For instance, looking at GX Eagle with the 32 tooth up front, you're going to have max ratio of 356, minimum 0.71. Looking down here, you can get an idea of the kind of speeds you're going to get at a specific cadence. These are all calculated for my 29er, by the way. If I'm looking at the E13 with the same 32 tooth chainring, you can see here that I get a higher low gear, meaning I can go faster downhill, I assume, and it's a bit harder to pedal uphill. But if I change that chainring to a 30, all of a sudden I'm still higher than Eagle on the high end, but I'm coming very close, if not almost the same, with Eagle when it comes to climbing gear. So that's how you play with these gear calculators, just to decide what would be good for you. Now that you've chosen your chainring as well, let's get to installing the cassette. You're going to need, obviously, the locking ring and the tool that they provide. The instructions are pretty well laid out in 8 steps. You can use that as well. I'm going to use a new chain since this is a new cassette, 11-speed SRAM PCX1. You might need a bit more grease. This is what's provided with the cassette, which I like. This is a Shimano bottom bracket tool. Either that one or this will do the trick. And you need a chain whip, not to uninstall, but to install this particular cassette. These cassettes install quite differently from a SRAM cassette on the XD driver, and that is mostly because of this 9-tooth cog. They had to come up with a different mechanism to attach the cluster of cogs to the XD driver, because the steel ones that you see over here up to 28, they don't connect directly to the XD driver. They actually connect to the aluminum carrier of the 3 big cogs. These two interconnect, and that's the reason why they give you this unlocked and locked position. There are 3 tabs here. The older cassettes had more, and you can see them 1, 2 down here, 3 over there. As you rotate one versus the other, this tab onto the steel cogs is gonna interconnect with that tongue on the aluminum carrier, and that's how they stay together. As you are putting torque here on the steel cogs, you're not relying on that little mechanism to transfer the force to the wheel, but you have these aluminum blocks over here. You have 1 next to each of those tongues, 1, 2, and 3, and that's where your connection blocks are going to stop. You have a bushing over here as well. Here we go. This has to be greased just to make sure that there's no creaking. The main contact point between the cassette and the XD driver is here at the base, so make sure you grease up that spline as well as the thread here on the XD driver. With that completed, just grab the aluminum carrier and push it in. The locking ring secures this in place. You're going to need 25 Newton meters or snug plus 45 degrees, which is 1/8 of a turn, not a quarter turn like I mentioned it in my previous video. They also suggest to use grease here on the threads, so apply it liberally as well. Since these are all interconnecting metal parts, I would also suggest to put a bit of grease here at the base where the locking ring is going to touch the aluminum carrier. I suggest always starting that locking ring by hand, then using the cassette tool, tighten it to snug, then give it that extra nudge, 1/8 of a turn as suggested. I have the torque range set up to 25 Newton meters. Yep, it is actually more than 25 Newton meters. With the aluminum part installed, I'm going to re-grease these contact points here and also under the bushing on the steel part of the cassette. You need a grease on that bushing because that's what connects directly to the top of the XD driver and also connects to the inside of your cassette over here. I'm just going to look for that indicator, the locked up position, and in order for this to ever interconnect, I'm going to have to push it flush. So I'm applying quite a bit of pressure here. If you're not sure, just grab a socket and a rubber mallet and just tap it a couple of times. Grab your chain whip. I'm going to keep a bit of pressure here on the cogs and just push it in place. Once it starts to go, there's a positive, it's not a click, but you feel it when it's locked into position. And here it is. And here is on the stand, guys. This time I decided to do it differently. I put about 20 kilometers on the drivetrain already, trying to get that braking period out of the way. On the chain, which I kept the KMC, just to be able to compare apples to apples, I added a couple of links. I ended up with big to big plus 4 links for my full suspension bike. How do you know that you have enough chain for your bike? Well, if you look here on the biggest cog, you got to make sure that you have enough movement here on your cage just to make up for your chain growth as the suspension moves up and down. Here at the other end, same thing. You're trying to make sure you still have a bit of tension here on your spring, and also obviously that you have enough clearance for the top jockey. This 9th cog can create issues with clearance here, and you can see it very close to my frame, maybe about 2 millimeters up top here, is actually coming closer to the derailleur hanger than it's to the frame. The interesting thing was that when replacing the Shimano 1142 with the 946, so the limiter screws both here and on the big cog, they were spot on. They don't have to touch anything. The barrel adjuster that takes care of the shifting between the gears, I didn't have to touch that one either. The only thing that I had to adjust though was the B screw, which is right here. For the M8000, M9000 you need a 2 millimeter Allen key. I had to give it a couple more turns to push the derailleur further away from the cassette. That is to clear the 46 teeth biggest cog over here. What I ended up with is about 8 millimeter gap or B gap for this Shimano drivetrain. The reason why I didn't want to replace this chain was because this with the 1142 cassette from Shimano was causing big trouble when backpedaling on the 42. On this 946, no problem. As you probably know from one of my previous videos, if you just replace the chain with the SRAM one, that usually helps with the chain not jumping that aggressively from the big cog. Talk about shifting, I would say is on par with the performance of the 1142 Shimano or the SRAM Eagle. Here we go. One by one, up shifts, down shifts. The downshifts are a bit smoother, very smooth actually. And here is dumping 2, because I can, and jumping up 3 or 4. There you go. But enough of this testing on the stand, let me take it to the trails. I was lucky to get half decent weather out in the woods to test this, and here you can see shifts to 46 under power, then the shifts down all the way to the 9th cog, mostly to show it to you guys. And here's the shift between the steel and the aluminum cogs. So after a couple of rides out in the woods, about 2.5 hours put on this drivetrain, what do I think? Well, first of all, I think we're spoiled to have all these good options these days. This 11-speed drivetrain, really wide range of gears, performs flawlessly. I'm very, very impressed. It works as well as the Shimano Cassette that it replaced. I've used this with an XT GS or medium cage rear derailleur. The KMC chain that is pretty bad actually with the Shimano Cassette. On this one it's okay. I have a 1-up oval 32 tooth and an XTR shifter. In order to take full advantage of this gear range, I would have to replace my chainring with the 30, because right now I don't think I will ever use the 9-tooth cog or the 11th gear on the back. But aside from that, really smooth upshift. So going towards the bigger cogs, absolutely flawless. There is no jump here between the steel and aluminum. You don't feel that transition whatsoever. Coming down the Cassette from the big cogs, so upshifts are a bit noisier. It might be because of the slightly bigger jumps between gears, but aside from that, absolutely flawless performance. And that's all I have for you guys today. If you have any questions, let me know in the section below. If you want to purchase any one of these, use the links in the description. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and until next time, I hope you're having epic rides like this, guys. Cheers.